Hey guys, I'm Jessie, and today I'm going to talk to you about all of my favorite books from the year 2021. These are not all released in 2021. These are just books that I read, and we also have one honorable mention. These are not going to include any second or third books in series that I finished, so we're not going to talk about Bands of Mourning. We're not going to talk about any second or third books. All of these will be either standalones or first books. I think most of these are first book in series. Because, while I loved a lot of sequels, I feel like that's not helpful for anyone, right? It's I loved book 2, but what about book 1? So we're going to talk about all of my favorite books, excluding sequels, except for one honorable mention. First and foremost, we've got The Disasters by M.K. England. This is a standalone YA sci-fi, but it is so much more than that. I actually have a full review. If you want to check that out, you can. But this is just a good freaking time. And I feel like it's super underrated. People don't talk about it enough, and they should be, because it's fantastic. Space is hard, grab a helmet. That is literally the tagline. And it is about this kind of ragtag group of people that are getting kicked out on day 1 of the new school year from this space academy up by the moon. And they're on this ship ready to dock out when the school is attacked. Everyone except for them is murdered. They have to run away. Now they're on the run. And this is such a ragtag group of people that you don't think should be friends and become the best found family ever. So really, this book is just fun. So I highly recommend it. One of my favorites of the year. Moving on, my next favorite of the year was City of Brass by S.A. Chakravorty. This is the first book in the Day of a Bad series. I know I am behind on reading this series. I should have read it forever ago. But you know what? We just got to it this year and I absolutely loved it. It is a beautiful Middle Eastern inspired world. We're set in Cairo. We're set in all over, and it's so beautiful. We are following Nari, who is a street urchin kind of con woman. And at some point, she ends up accidentally summoning a djinn. And this djinn now has to take her to Daevabad because things are chasing them and trying to kill them. And she's like, what the heck is going on? And apparently, she's got some heritage that she didn't know about. So I love learning that with her. I love their journey. I love all the characters in this book. I even did a reading and recipes where I created a Egyptian-inspired street food that kind of really reminded me of this book because there were so many mentions of food in this book, and I absolutely loved it. Next, we have a very surprise, out-of-left-field book that I ended up absolutely loving this year, and that is The Prison Healer by Lynette Nani. This was one that I had never heard of. I didn't hear of the releases. I ended up getting an arc on NetGalley, and then I got it in a fairy loot box, which this is the beautiful fairy loot edition. And y'all, I flew through this. I loved it so much. We are following Kiva, who is in a death prison, and she is the healer. So she is in charge of intaking new prisoners that come in, and she has to kind of give them a health scan, and then she has to carve into their hand their marking that says they're a prisoner. And one day the rebel queen comes into her prison on her last leg, on her deathbed, and Kiva has to find a way to keep her alive to go through these trials, and actually ends up having to undergo these trials herself to try to free this rebel queen. And it is fantastic. I am waiting on book 2 to arrive to my doorstep, and I just loved it, y'all. Next up, we have Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick. Again, another just fantastic, epic, high fantasy. This is another one where I got the NetGalley arc, hadn't really heard anything about it, read it, then I had to buy the physical copy because it was so good. We're following this girl named Ren, and she is, again, a con artist. She is trying to con herself into this wealthy, noble family as a long lost cousin. But little does she know that this family is almost destitute, and she ends up really ingratiating herself into this family, becoming a member of the family, and then kind of chaos ensues where she ends up having to out herself and protect this family. And there is some crazy magic in this. I love it. There's like 2 different magic systems. We don't really get a whole lot of info on it. So I'm really hoping that book 2 will give me more of the magic, because there's like tarot magic and then there's like a drawing like glyph type magic, which love that. And I have book 2. I just have not read it yet, but this one is fantastic. Next up, we have The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This is the Illumicrate special edition that they did. So pretty. I read Starless Sea last year. Absolutely loved it. So I knew I was going to enjoy this. It is a circus book. It is forbidden romance. It is a very whimsical, magical, just crazy book. And it's told in multiple timelines. So you get like some flashbacks, some flash forwards. And you're basically following these 2 young magicians throughout their entire life and how they work on this magical night circus that comes in the middle of the night and leaves just as quickly as it came. And I loved it. It was such a fantastic book. And honestly, at this point, I think Erin Morgenstern can do no wrong. Next, I have a very surprising book. And you'll know why it was surprising that this is a favorite of the year once I show it. And that is Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. If you've watched me before, you know I did not like Malice very much. I didn't hate it, but it was just like, meh, it was okay. I picked up this one and absolutely loved it. So I was really, really happy about that. One of our main characters is a mother, and she is basically forced to go on this quest to save her son. And we're following a couple other people, some mercenaries, an escaped slave, a former princess who is now working with these mercenaries and trying to prove herself as a warrior. It's so good. There's forbidden magic and gods, and it's just so great. I really, really enjoyed this. I loved our main character, Orca. She was my absolute favorite. Obviously, as a mom, I like reading about moms, badass moms. So this gave me that. And y'all, we just got the cover for book 2 and I'm so hyped for it. Then finally, we have probably the hardest book for me to pick. And that was The Bone Maker by Sarah Beth Durst. And the reason I say that this was really a difficult decision for me was not because I'm like on the edge of how I feel about this book. I love it. But I read a bunch of Sarah Beth Durst books this year, and it was really hard to pick one that was my favorite because I wanted to pick all of them. This, and then Race the Sands, and then Queen of Blood. Like, how could I narrow it down? But Bone Maker did end up winning out. In this book, we follow this group of people who had saved the world 25 years before. And the book starts where they're basically having to like get back together and save the world again because the big bad may not actually be dead. And it is so good. It is a fantasy standalone, adult fantasy standalone. And the reason this one made the list was because this was my first Sarah Beth Durst book. This is the one that introduced me to her and the one that made me want to buy all of the rest of her books. I did say I had a honorable mention that I couldn't not talk about, and that is The Reluctant Queen, also by Sarah Beth Durst. And this is a second book in a series. This is book 2 to Queens of Renthia. Book 1 is Queen of Blood. I loved Queen of Blood, but this one is my favorite in the whole series. We are introduced to another badass mom in this book, and she is, like they said, she is the reluctant queen. She doesn't want to use her magic. She just wants to raise her kids and do nothing. Like, she just wants to raise her kids and be safe and, like, not cause waves. But man, you know that can't happen in a fantasy book. I loved this. I love the whole series, but this is probably my favorite one. I won't talk too much about it because, like I said, it is a second book, but just go read anything by Sarah Beth Durst. I actually have an interview with her if you want to check it out. Sophia and I from Sophia's Thoughts did one, and she's a fantastic woman. Like, she was so sweet. All right, well, thank you guys for hanging out with me. These are all of my favorite books from the year. Let me know what you think of any of these books and what your favorite books of the year were. All right, I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.